I'll tell you a story that chills me to my very core every time I think about it. It was the kind of horror that doesn't rely on ghosts or monsters, but rather the twisted depths of the human mind. It all began when I got a job at a prestigious restaurant called Chester's. Chester's was renowned for its exquisite cuisine, elegant decor, and an ambience that oozed sophistication. People came from all corners of the city to savor the culinary delights that graced its menu. It was the kind of place that was perfect for special occasions, where lovers celebrated anniversaries and business deals were sealed with a clink of fine crystal. I was a humble waiter at Chester's, fresh out of college and grateful for the opportunity. My colleagues were all seasoned professionals, and I felt like the odd one out, trying my best not to spill wine on the white tablecloths or mispronounce the French names of the dishes. One evening, as the sun dipped below the city's skyline and the restaurant's dim golden lighting took over, I noticed a peculiar man seated alone at one of my tables. He was dressed in a well-tailored suit that seemed a little out of place among the more casually dressed patrons. His face, though not unattractive, had an unsettling quality about it. His eyes were too sharp, his smile too practiced. "Good evening, sir," I greeted him with a polite smile. "Welcome to Chester's. My name is Alex, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you off with something to drink?" The man's lips curled into a sinister grin, revealing perfectly white teeth. "Ah, Alex, what a delightful name," he purred. "I'll have a glass of your finest red wine." As I retreated to fetch his wine, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. It was as if a chill had settled in my bones, and the ambient hum of chatter and clinking silverware around us seemed to grow quieter, almost muffled. I returned with his wine, poured it into a crystal glass, and placed it before him. "Here you go, sir," I said, trying my best to mask my unease. "Have you had a chance to look at the menu?" He glanced at the menu for a moment, then slowly raised his head to meet my gaze. "I'll have the specious," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "But I want it rare, Alex. Very rare." Nodding, I jotted down his order and made my way to the kitchen. The chef, a stout man with a penchant for perfection, gave me a nod of approval. "Very rare indeed," he muttered as he started preparing the dish. When I returned with the man's meal, he had taken a sip of his wine and was smiling that eerie smile again. I placed the plate before him, and the scent of the seared meat filled the air. The man cut into the steak, and blood oozed from its center, staining the white porcelain. His eyes never left mine as he took a bite, his lips parting to reveal those unnaturally white teeth. It was a sight that sent shivers down my spine. "Delicious," he mumbled between bites, his eyes never leaving mine. "You know, Alex, I can tell you have great potential. A bright future ahead of you." I thanked him for the compliment, but his words hung heavy in the air, like a thick fog. The rest of the evening passed as a blur of serving other tables and trying to ignore the unsettling feeling that had settled in my chest. As the night wore on, I noticed that the man was still at his table, nursing the same glass of wine. He hadn't touched his meal, and his gaze had shifted from me to something else in the restaurant. I followed his line of sight and saw a beautiful woman sitting alone at the bar. Her long, ebony hair cascaded down her back, and her red dress clung to her like a second skin. She exuded an air of elegance and sensuality that seemed out of place in our modest restaurant. The man's eyes were fixed on her, a hunger in his gaze that made my skin crawl. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the unfolding drama. The man rose from his table, leaving his barely touched meal behind, and approached the woman at the bar. She seemed surprised but not entirely displeased by his attention. I watched as they engaged in conversation, his words low and smooth, her laughter tinkling like a wind chime in the evening breeze. They seemed drawn to each other in a way that defied explanation, like moths to a flame. As the minutes turned into hours, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The restaurant had emptied out, and the staff was busy with closing duties, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. I needed to know what was happening with the man and the woman. Then, as if on cue, the woman stood up, her movements graceful and fluid. The man followed suit, and they left the restaurant together, disappearing into the night. It was only then that I realized they hadn't paid their bill. I hurried over to their table, a sinking feeling in my stomach. What I found chilled me to the bone. The plate of rare steak had been nearly untouched, but there was something else on the table, a small black velvet box. I opened it with trembling hands and found a single gleaming tooth. My mind raced with 1,000 questions, but there were no answers. I couldn't comprehend what had just transpired, and a heavy sense of dread settled over me. I knew I had to find out more about that man and the woman, no matter the cost. In the days that followed, I delved into the restaurant's history, searching for any mention of similar incidents. What I discovered sent shivers down my spine. There had been stories, wheeze, breeze, passed down through generations of staff, of strange occurrences at Chester's. It seemed that every few years, a peculiar patron would visit the restaurant, a man with sharp eyes and an unsettling smile. And every time, he would leave with a beautiful woman, and they would disappear, leaving behind a box containing a single tooth. No one knew who the man was, where he came from, or what he did with those women. The stories were never reported to the authorities, as the staff feared the restaurant's reputation would be tarnished. As I continued my investigation, I stumbled upon an old photograph in the restaurant's archives. It was a picture of the restaurant from decades ago, and in the background, I saw a familiar face, the man with the unsettling smile, seated at a table with a woman in a red dress. I couldn't believe my eyes. The man had been coming to Chester's for generations, and no one had ever been able to stop him or discover the fate of those women. It was as if he and the restaurant were bound by some sinister pact. Determined to break this cycle of horror, I began to dig deeper. I reached out to former employees and patrons, hoping to uncover any clues that might lead to the man's identity or the whereabouts of the missing women. But the more I uncovered, the more I realized the true nature of the horror that had gripped Chester's. It wasn't just the man or the disappearances, it was the restaurant itself. Chester's had a dark history, one that was carefully concealed beneath its glamorous exterior. Over the years, Eerie's Sinister had amassed a hidden fortune, built on secrets, lies, and the suffering of those who had crossed its path. It seemed that the man with the unsettling smile was not just a patron, he was a part of the restaurant's malevolent legacy. As I dug deeper, I found evidence of a cult-like following that revered Chester's as a place of power and influence. The missing women were not victims, but willing participants in a dark ritual that promised them beauty, wealth, and immortality in exchange for their souls. I knew I had to put an end to this madness, to break the cycle and save those who had fallen under the restaurant's sinister spell. But as I delved deeper into the secrets of Chester's, I realized that the darkness ran deeper than I could have ever imagined. The man with the unsettling smile was not just a patron. He was the embodiment of the restaurant's malevolent soul, a manifestation of its insatiable hunger for power and control. As I confronted the man in the restaurant one fateful evening, I could feel the weight of the centuries pressing down on me. He smiled that same sinister smile, and I knew that this was a battle I might not survive. But I couldn't let the horrors of Chester's continue. With a resolve born of desperation and a sense of duty, I confronted the man, determined to put an end to his reign of terror. The restaurant seemed to come alive around us, the walls pulsating with a malevolent energy. The patrons and staff, all under the restaurant's sway, turned to watch, their eyes vacant and devoid of humanity. The man's smile widened, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth, and with a flick of his wrist, he sent me hurtling across the room. I crashed into a table, sending shattered glass and silverware flying. As I struggled to my feet, I saw him advancing toward me, his eyes gleaming with malevolence. It was a battle of wills, a struggle for the very soul of Chester's. I knew that I had to find a way to break the restaurant's hold on him, to free him from its insidious influence. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I called out to him, pleading with him to remember who he once was, to break free from the darkness that had consumed him. His smile faltered for a moment, and I saw a glimmer of recognition in his eyes. But the restaurant fought back, unleashing a torrent of psychic energy that threatened to overwhelm me. It was a battle of mind and spirit, a fight for my very soul. In the end, I prevailed. The man with the unsettling smile crumpled to the floor, his body racked with sobs as he was freed from the restaurant's grip. The patrons and staff slowly began to stir, their vacant expressions giving way to confusion and fear. Chester's had been vanquished, its dark secrets laid bare for all to see. The restaurant's power was broken, and the missing women were returned to their families, their memories of the horrors they had endured erased. But the scars of that night would never fully heal. Chester's was no longer a place of prestige and elegance. It was a symbol of the darkness that could lurk beneath even the most glamorous facade. As I stood amidst the wreckage of the once proud restaurant, I couldn't help but wonder if the man with the unsettling smile had truly been freed, or if he was forever condemned to carry the weight of Chester's malevolence with him. One thing was certain: the horror of Chester's would never truly be forgotten, and the nightmares of that night would haunt me for the rest of my days.